The largest prisoner exchange since the end of the Cold War puts a new spotlight on the tense relationship between the U.S. and Russia. In his time as U.S. ambassador to Russia, John J. Sullivan met with one of those freed Americans, Paul Whelan, and worked to release others. Sullivan's new book, Midnight in Moscow, a memoir from the front lines of Russia's war against the West, reflects on his service in the Trump and the Biden administrations. We're happy to say that John J. Sullivan is now a CBS News contributor. Good morning, and welcome.
Good
Boy, John,
good to be with you.
What timing for your book? You couldn't have possibly timed it this way, but when the news broke, I thought, and he's coming to us on Monday. I couldn't wait to talk to you.
Yes, indeed. No, it was a great day last week when those Americans came home.
I know, because you had talked to Paul Whelan and several of the other hostages several times. So what did you think, and how do you think that Paul survived during this time? Tell us about that.
He is himself a very strong person, but it requires really incredible will and willpower. He was trapped in a criminal justice system that wasn't interested in his guilt or innocence. They were interested in the fact that he was an American and only that he was an American. He hadn't committed a crime. And to spend almost 6 years in dangerous circumstances, dangerous because the Russian prison system is notorious for not just violence and hostility to Americans, but TB and AIDS. It's a very risky place to be. So it required real willpower and strength on his part.
And the controversy that some say, well, now that it'll now be open seasons, especially on especially on Americans to be held hostage, just so they can get these kind of deals. What do you say about that?
Well, from my perspective, having served as ambassador there for 3 years from the end of 2019 to 22.
And had dealings with President Putin.
With Putin. It was already open season on Americans. That's why we had these Americans that we had to get out. Evan was arrested after I had left. So it has been open season on Americans because Russia, Putin, his government, the Kremlin, believes it's at war with the United States, and the United States is its enemy. So Americans, it's open season on Americans in Russia.
It's been 2.5 years since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You have written that Vladimir Putin, in his mind, there is no off-ramp for this war. What does that mean?
He has set goals for what they call the special military operation, which anyone who's observed what they've done calls a war, an aggressive war. He wants to, as he puts it, denazify and demilitarize Ukraine. He's never varied from those war goals, and he won't. He is committed to this. It's part of his being, who he is, achieving these war goals. So when people ask me what his off-ramp is, I used to joke. I joked with Secretary Blinken once, because he was asked the same question, and I said, we got to turn this around and say, if we want to draw an analogy and use a highway or a turnpike analogy for the New Jersey Turnpike, he'd like a rest area, the Vince Lombardi rest stop, to refit and regroup. But he doesn't want an off-ramp.
But you write in midsummer of 2022, you thought Putin, that he had lost the war, that the war was a failure. As we sit here in 2024, do you still feel that way?
Well, yes and no, in the sense that if Putin was looking to make Russia more secure and capture Ukraine as he wanted, he's failed. And it's not secure because NATO has expanded. The Russian border with NATO has expanded.
How does the prisoner swap, the war in Ukraine, impact the upcoming elections? Again, you've worked with 5 presidents in the total time in as far as service, but how does that impact the upcoming 2024 election? How does the world see some of the moves that Americans are making?
Well, I've been asked about this from the Russian perspective. Did the upcoming U.S. election, for example, influence Putin's decision to release the Americans?
Some people think it did. Do you?
You can't discount. I will say this. It is impossible to say that he didn't consider. I'm sure he considered it. Whether it was the primary factor that influenced his decision, I can't say that. What I know is he in particular wanted this assassin, Krasikov, released. That was the most important.
Well, it's interesting in your book you say both President Trump and President Biden thought you were nuts that you wanted to be in Moscow, number one, but you wanted to be there. It was personal for you. And you said serving under President Trump, you write about his chaotic and undisciplined style. You worried about that in November?
Well, it made my life as deputy secretary very difficult and stressful. Some of the the policy shifts that we had to implement. 3 years of serving as Deputy Secretary of State, I was ready for a change, but I didn't want to leave government service. And the opportunity to serve in Moscow came along when Ambassador Huntsman announced that he was going to leave Moscow and run for governor again in Utah. And I thought, boy, this is an opportunity to serve in a dangerous, difficult place and serve my country.
Yeah.
Little did I know that I was going to serve when Putin would start this massive war.
No one knew that.
And the toll it took on your family, too. It's all in the
Indeed,
book.
yes,
Yeah.
the death threats that you received. Ambassador Sullivan, thank you very, very much. The book is Midnight in Moscow. It goes on sale tomorrow.